What if the forest was never meant to give up its secrets? On a freezing October morning in 2024, 63-year-old Thomas Novak, a retired forestry worker from Pleasant, stepped off the marked trail near the Czech-German border. He followed twisted game paths through a moss-covered forest that hadn't seen loggers in decades. He was hunting for mushrooms. What he discovered instead made his blood run cold. Wedged beneath the roots of a fallen beech tree, half buried by soil and time, sat a rusted metal box. The kind used by the German Wehrmacht during World War II. The clasp had rusted shut, but the tree's collapse had cracked the corner open, revealing what lay inside. Tomas forced it open with a stick. Inside, water-damaged but still readable leather-bound journals, brittle envelopes sealed with faded red wax, and a bundle of black and white photographs wrapped in oilskin. One envelope was stamped Geheim, German for secret. At first, Tomas figured it was some kind of prank, a forgotten movie prop, perhaps. But as he turned through the pages, the language, the dates, the names, they felt authentic, too authentic. He snapped photos with his phone, then stepped back, heart racing. Something about the discovery felt dangerous, heavy, like opening a door that should have stayed locked forever. By the next morning, the Czech National Heritage Institute had sealed off the site. Military historians arrived. So did forensics teams. The forest, once abandoned, was now swarming with officials, reporters, and silent men in dark cars. The documents were genuine. The paper matched 1940 German military stock. The handwriting was compared with archived records and quickly traced to one name, Oberst Wilhelm Kruger, a man the records claimed had vanished without a trace in 1943. The box hadn't just survived the decades, it had waited. Hidden, buried, silent for 82 years. What it held would destroy assumptions, fuel conspiracy theories, and reopen one of the most quietly troubling disappearances of the Nazi era. And the closer investigators dug, the more the forest seemed to fight their presence. Phones died without explanation. GPS signals went haywire, weather patterns changed without warning. Locals spoke of old places that refused to be disturbed. But it was too late, the past had already risen. And it carried questions that still have no answers. Wilhelm Kruger was not a famous name. Not in Germany, not in Prague, not even among military history experts. But in 1943, within a closed circle of officers in Hitler's war machine, his name meant something. Born in Leipzig in 1899, Kruger was a product of Old Prussia. Disciplined, calculating, fluent in 5 languages, and fanatically loyal. Or so his superiors thought. He served in World War I as a teenage cadet, rejoined military service during Germany's rearmament, and by the time the Third Reich reached its peak, he'd climbed to the rank of Obercolonel. Not flashy, not a battlefield leader, but Kruger had access. Files, routes, codes, logistics. The unglamorous nervous systems that kept the Reich's darker operations alive. And then, in March 1943, he vanished. The official record is thin. On March 7th, Kruger left Prague with a small convoy of 3 vehicles, 2 military transports and a third unmarked car. The destination was a fortified outpost in Saxony. Only 2 of the 3 vehicles ever reached it. The car carrying Kruger disappeared somewhere along the Sudetenland highlands. No bodies, no wreckage, no communication. Just a blank space where a man and everything he knew should have been. In the months after, internal memos circulated, marked verdict confidential, suggesting Kruger may have run off with sensitive materials. Others feared betrayal, a possible defection. Yet no Allied agency ever reported contact with a man matching Kruger's description. No arrest, no interrogation, no grave. His family was quietly moved, his name wiped from active files. Whatever happened, the Reich chose to bury it. But whispers survived. Among Czech partisans, Kruger's name became linked to a rumor, that of a Nazi courier who tried to flee, not for escape, but to hide something. Not gold, not weapons, documents, evidence, the kind that could destroy powerful men. After the war, Soviet intelligence searched the region but found nothing. West German archivists called it a myth, just another ghost story. But for those who studied wartime disappearances, Kruger was the puzzle piece that never fit. A man who knew too much vanished too perfectly. And now, 82 years later, the forest had returned him. Not his body, but his secrets. The question was, why now? And who was supposed to find them? To understand Wilhelm Kruger's disappearance, investigators first had to understand the man himself. Something far harder than his military file suggested. Born in Leipzig in 1899, Kruger entered adulthood shaped by the broken aftermath of World War I. At 17, he enlisted as a cadet. Too young for the front lines, but old enough to watch an empire crumble. Friends from that time described him as brilliant but cold. A young man who memorized entire maps and foreign alphabets, but avoided small talk with almost obsessive focus. After the Treaty of Versailles destroyed the German army, Kruger drifted between low-level clerical posts until the newly rising Reich began rearming. It was there, inside the bureaucratic engine of the Wehrmacht, that his talents finally found purpose. He became a strategist. Not in the flashy sense of commanding divisions, but in the quiet, invisible way wars are actually fought. Supply lines, transport routes, document couriers, coded communications. He worked in the shadows of operations others took credit for. A ghost inside the system, and as the war grew, so did his access. He handled sealed orders, troop movements, intelligence packets routed between Berlin, Prague, and occupied territories. His clearance level placed him among those who knew things meant to stay hidden. But while his file painted a picture of a reliable officer, personal accounts revealed something much stranger. Former colleagues described him as withdrawn, even isolated. He avoided the brotherhood expected of officers, preferring long solitary walks or hours locked in his office, writing in languages no one else understood. One aide recalled Kautsky nights when Kruger would flinch at the sound of footsteps in the corridor, convinced someone was watching. Another claimed he once discovered Kruger burning a stack of papers in a metal bin, whispering that they were watching him. Who they were, he never explained. By 1942, he had become a contradiction inside the Reich, loyal enough to be trusted, but nervous enough to spark quiet worry. Yet no one dismissed him. Perhaps they needed him too desperately. Perhaps they underestimated him. Or perhaps, as some historians now suggest, Kruger had already understood what others refused to accept, that the Reich was breaking apart from within. And that knowledge, more than any enemy, might have been what finally placed him in the crosshairs of history. When investigators finally opened the brittle contents of the forest cache, one fragment immediately caught attention. A single page torn from a larger packet, stamped with a faded eagle seal and marked Nur für den Empfänger, for recipient. Only the handwriting, verified against Kruger's journals, left no question. He had written it himself. The message was brief, mysterious, and disturbing. Proceed to Fort Ravenstein. Secure package 12B. Await further contact. No date, no signature. Just those words, as if Kruger had known time itself might one day examine. What he wrote? Fort Ravenstein was a small medieval fortress in Saxony, reused by the Nazis during the war for restricted operations. But the term package 12B was the detail that shocked historians. It appeared nowhere in standard Wehrmacht archives. No military unit, no shipment record, no prisoner designation, nothing. Whatever 12B was, it had existed only in the deep classified channels of wartime Germany. And yet the name surfaced repeatedly in Kruger's writings. In one journal entry, hastily written and water-damaged, he mentioned the burden of 12B and warned that possession means death, failure means worse. Another passage, nearly impossible to read, stated if intercepted, destroy 12B immediately. Do. Not let it reach the wrong hands. But what were the wrong hands? Allied forces, rival Nazi factions, or someone else entirely? Analysts began to suspect the order had not been meant for normal military operations. It didn't match Kruger's typical logistical style. It read more like a warning or a confession. Theories exploded. Some believed 12B was a collection of war crimes, evidence meant to be buried before Germany's collapse. Others suspected it could be a file containing names of double agents, people whose exposure would have destroyed entire intelligence networks. But one detail wouldn't disappear. Kruger received this order just days before his convoy vanished. If he truly attempted to reach Fort Rabenstein, he never arrived. Or perhaps he did, and what he found there was deadly enough to silence him forever. Whatever 12B represented, one thing was clear. Kruger was not just transporting secrets. He was carrying something someone desperately needed to erase. And 82 years later, its shadow was surfacing again. It wasn't the content of the documents that disturbed the analysts. It was what they suggested. Scattered among Kruger's journals and sealed packets were names, aliases, and coded routes, all pointing back to Prague, specifically a set of underground courier operations that appeared to exist entirely outside the Wehrmacht's official command structure. The markings matched nothing in standard Nazi records. No unit insignias, no logistics files, no clear chain of command. Just fragments. Code names, train manifests, coordinates with no explanation. One memo referred to something called Kanaldre Channel 3. Another included lists of civil transport contact. Civilian transport contacts across Bohemia and Saxony. Someone had built a ghost network within the Nazi machine. And Kruger, it seemed, was right in the center of it. The most fascinating find was a folded page tucked behind a leather flap in one of the journals. It listed times for a train departing Prague's Masaryk station, except the platform number didn't exist. When checked against Czech rail archives, experts realized it wasn't a standard passenger train at all. It was a maintenance line shut down. Since 1938, that had quietly remained operational through the war. For who and for what purpose, no one knows. But these were not smugglers moving stolen gold or hidden artwork. The notes suggest something else entirely. Document shipments, realtor film, coded message tubes, paper, not treasure. Evidence. Some historians now believe Kruger wasn't loyal to Berlin. Not anymore. By late 1942, he had access to high-level intelligence about forced deportations, extermination protocols, and black site experiments in occupied territories. The documents indicate he may have begun copying what he saw. Organizing it into a ledger meant not to serve the Reich, but to expose it. Whether he acted alone or under foreign influence remains unclear. British records remain silent. Soviet intelligence infamously redacted. But one possibility terrifies investigators more than any other. That Kruger wasn't just running information. He was protecting it. Moving evidence of Nazi war crimes out of Germany before Berlin could collapse and before the architects of genocide could erase their fingerprints. If true, it would make him one of the most significant unknown figures of World War II. A man erased because he knew too much. A ghost operating in the heart of Europe's most violent empire. And if the shadow network he used is real, it may still hold secrets the world has never seen. The last official sighting of Colonel Wilhelm Kruger was at 6:45 a.m. on March 7th, 1943. Eyewitnesses, station guards at a restricted supply depot east of Prague, watched as a 3-vehicle convoy rolled out under gray skies, fog trailing behind them like smoke from a dying fire. The lead truck, a covered Opel Blitz, carried sealed crates marked as archival materials. The second, nearly identical, transported unknown cargo. The third was a modified staff car with reinforced axles and blackout curtains drawn tight. Krieger was seated inside, flanked by 2 aides whose names never appear again in any record. The stated destination was a fortified estate near Chemnitz, known informally as Schloss Ravenstein. By dusk, only 2 vehicles arrived. The convoy had taken Route 68, a narrow mountain passage twisting through the Sudeten highlands. Normally used for civilian travel, the road had been temporarily cleared for high-security operations. But somewhere between the town of Jablon and the western ridge of Toil Shu, the third vehicle simply disappeared. The drivers of the first 2 trucks claimed the road was clear the entire way. No delays, no wreckage, no sign of a breakdown. When pressed, one of the soldiers said something that still unnerves researchers today. It was there, then it wasn't. He asked about Hadfold. Military investigators swept the area over the following days. No impact site, no debris, no burned-out frame or splintered tires at the bottom of a ravine. Just endless pine forest, narrow goat paths, and snow melt rushing through the rocks. The case was quietly buried, no public inquiry, no official report, beyond the briefest mention in a private SS memo later seized by Allied forces. It read Robinstein shipment incomplete. Section C classified, do not pursue. But survivors in nearby villages remembered that week. Strange activity in the hills, low-flying planes, dogs barking without stopping at night. One farmer swore he heard a single gunshot echo off the ridgeline 2 days after the convoy vanished. No one believed him. To this day, no trace of the third vehicle has ever been found. It didn't explode, it didn't crash. It simply left Prague and never arrived. A sealed car, a missing colonel, and a package known only as 12B, all swallowed by the Sudeten Mountains. It was summer 1952. A Czech farmer named Janek Horak was clearing brush from an old cattle path near the southern edge of the TFL Show Ridge when his shovel hit something solid. At first, he assumed it was just another rusted ammunition box, remnants of a war the region was still trying to forget. But what he dug up was stranger. A Wehrmacht officer's satchel, cracked and stiff with age, its leather blackened from time. And rot, the shoulder strap had nearly fallen apart. The brass buckle was locked shut by rust. And when Janek forced it open, the smell hit him first. Mildew, ash, and something unmistakably metallic. Inside the satchel was a bundle of charred documents and one folded sheet of paper, burned at the edges with a smear of something brown across the top. Blood, perhaps. The ink had run in places, but the words were still readable. It was a letter. Not official correspondence, not propaganda. Personal, handwritten in fluent, almost obsessive German. The name at the top was Wilhelm. The recipient. Unnamed, but the first line began Meinbruder, my brother. The letter read like a warning disguised as a confession. If this reaches you, I am either a dead man or something far worse. I have seen what they've hidden. I have carried their lies wrapped in wax and string. I was loyal until I understood what loyalty truly cost. Do not look for me. Do not speak. My name, if they come, tell them I was weak. Tell them I was afraid. That may be the only truth left. It ended without a signature. The last line was cut off by a burn mark, as if someone had tried to destroy it in a hurry and failed. Janek, shaken, turned the satchel over to local authorities. They archived it without ceremony, labeling it Field Artifact 7145B and tucked it into a locked basement of a regional museum. For decades, no one thought twice. The Cold War had begun. No one wanted to dig up Nazi ghosts. It wasn't until the 2024 discovery of Kruger's cache that the satchel was reviewed again. A handwriting analyst confirmed it matched the journals found in the forest. The letter wasn't a hoax, it was real. And it placed Kruger not in myth or rumor, but in those mountains, bleeding, burning, and trying to reach a brother he knew would never find him. When the rusted box was recovered from beneath the beech tree roots, every item inside was treated like evidence from an active crime scene. Because in many ways it was. The Czech Historical Crime Division partnered with military archivists and independent forensic labs to examine the cache using both traditional techniques and modern technology. The results raised more questions than they answered. The first clue was the box itself, a wartime Wehrmacht courier case. Standard issue between 1940 and 1944, made of steel reinforced with a thin zinc lining. Soil composition around the cache confirmed it had been buried for decades, between 75 and 85 years, consistent with Kruger's disappearance in 1943. Pollen. Samples trapped in the box's hinge creases matched. Flowering patterns from a harsh winter-spring bloom of 1944. It hadn't been moved since. Inside the box, a folded piece of gray-green fabric was recovered, stiff with age and partially fused to the leather of a journal cover. Under magnification, analysts identified the material as wool-cotton blend, standard for Nazi officer uniforms. And sewn into the seam, still faintly visible, was a fragment of an embroidered shoulder tab. The initials WK could be made out in faded thread. Traces of dried blood were found on both the uniform scrap and one corner of the journal. The blood was degraded, Too old to yield a full DNA profile, but mitochondrial markers placed it as Central European male. Probable age 40 to 50. Kruger was 44 when he vanished. Not definitive, but chillingly close. More unsettling was the fire damage. Several documents showed signs of deliberate scorching. Singed edges, curling pages, and heat stress inconsistent with environmental exposure. The burns weren't random. They targeted specific paragraphs. Certain names were blackened beyond recognition, as if someone had tried to erase them just before burial. And then there were the fingerprints. Faint, partial, and degraded, but multiple. One matched an archival print known to belong to Kruger. Others remain unidentified. Were they his aides or someone else? Someone who tried to stop him? Whatever happened in that forest wasn't accidental. The evidence suggests desperation, haste, and fear. Kruger hadn't simply hidden his documents. He had tried to destroy them and failed, then buried the rest in a place the forest could keep until now. It was folded tightly and wedged behind the rear cover of Kruger's second journal, nearly invisible beneath a torn flap of leather binding. No title, no notes, just a rough sheet of parchment yellowed with age, the ink faded to a dark sepia. When investigators carefully unfolded it, the contents caused an immediate stir. This wasn't a navigational aid. It wasn't military-issue craffy. It was personal, crude, but deliberate, drawn in a mixture of fountain pen and pencil with quick strokes that suggested urgency over accuracy. And at the center of it, a single word repeated 3 times in blocky underlined script: to Felgrat, the Devil's Spine. The map showed a ridgeline with no official name, located near the Sudeten foothills. Isolated, steep, and surrounded by dense pine forest. Cross-referencing satellite imagery with Kruger's sketch revealed that the terrain had remained virtually untouched for over a century. No roads, no development, just trees and stone. Symbols dotted the page. Triangles marked ZP, likely Zugang, spunked or access points, and X over a specific outcropping and phrases in code language used by German field operatives. Schwagen must be wart, silence must be preserved, K-Rook, no return path. And the most chilling: 1-2 Bisacern. Secure 12B, do not open. At the lower corner, a sketched compass rose, pointed slightly off true north, adjusted for some local magnetic interference. The choice wasn't accidental. The compass discrepancy matched earlier reports from hikers and old forestry workers who spoke of strange pulls on their gear in that area. Compasses that spun, radios that crackled, even birds that refused to fly overhead. Teufelsgrat wasn't just a geographical reference. It was a message, a warning, possibly a burial site, possibly something else. In archived Czech folklore texts from the 1800s, the ridgeline is mentioned by name, an area considered untouchable by hunters and shepherds. Some called it cursed. Others claimed it had been struck by lightning repeatedly for reasons no one could explain. If Kruger chose that ridge to bury 12B, he hadn't done so randomly. He'd chosen a place the locals already feared, a place no one would return to. A place even nature seemed to avoid. The map wasn't just a trail, it was an omen, Teufelsgrat. The Devil's Spine is more than a name on a map. It's a scar across the Sudeten forest, known to locals for generations and avoided with quiet, almost superstitious respect. Even before the war, shepherds refused to graze their herds near the ridge. Hunters claimed their dogs would whimper and refused to climb the eastern slope. Loggers joked nervously that their tools dulled faster in those woods. After 1945, the stories only grew darker. During the chaos of the war's final years, a Nazi platoon was rumored to have vanished on a night patrol through the area. 32 men. No gunfire, no distress call. Just gone. Their commanding officer, a Holman Richter, allegedly wandered into a nearby village 3 days later, barefoot, delirious, and missing part of his tongue. He died in an asylum weeks later, never able to speak. Again, no bodies were recovered. The official report blamed desertion. The locals knew better. Fishermen along the rivers below the ridge told of strange lights moving through the treetops at night. silent pulsing glows in red and white. Others claimed to hear screaming from the cliffs when the wind shifted west, though no one was ever seen. After sunset, the forest turns unnaturally quiet. Birds stop singing, insects vanish. Even the rustle of trees seems distant, dampened. Search and rescue workers who ventured too close to Tograt's summit reported GPS failures and sudden nausea. Equipment batteries drained without explanation. Some refused to go back. One regional surveyor in the 1980s tried to map a section of the ridge for logging purposes. His notes, recovered after his resignation, were unsettling, felt watched. Trees in this area grow in patterns spiraled wrong. One karen discovered not made of natural stone, arranged intentionally. No animal. Tracks, left early. And then there's the local saying still whispered by older villagers, Werwald Denham unhelt, where the forest holds its breath. They don't explain it, they don't need to. Kruger didn't choose Teufelgrat by accident. He chose it because it was a place meant to be forgotten, hidden by nature, protected by fear. A place where silence reigns and nothing buried is meant to be found. And now, after 82 years, something buried there is stirring again. The connection came from an unexpected source, a fragment tucked inside one of Kruger's charred folders. Originally overlooked because it had fused to the inside of the case lid. When forensic archivists steamed it apart, a single heading leapt out, in English typed in block letters, Operation Eclipse. For weeks, the working theory had been that Kruger was either fleeing the Reich or covering up its collapse. But this changed everything. Eclipse was not a German initiative. It was Allied. A classified post-war operation orchestrated by the Office of Strategic Services. The precursor to the CIA, its mission was to seize Nazi documents, technology, and personnel before the Soviets could reach them. Officially, it began in 1945. Unofficially, the planning started much earlier. Now, there was evidence that Kruger had ties to it in 1943, 2 full years before the Allies marched into Berlin. The fragment included a list of code names, some later identified as early OSS handlers operating in neutral zones. Sweden, Portugal, Switzerland? But one name was blacked out with thick pencil marks, almost violently scrubbed. Forensic imaging revealed what lay beneath. E. Reinhardt, an American intelligence officer believed to have gone missing in 1944 during a classified operation in the Czech corridor. How Kruger came into contact with Allied agents remains unclear. Prague was a hotbed of espionage, with every major power operating inside the neutral embassies and diplomatic back channels. But one note, hastily scribbled in Kruger's journal, raises troubling possibilities. Too soon to cross, eclipse not ready, will bury instead, must delay the Soviets. Was Kruger trying to defect, or was he playing both sides? One theory suggests he was a reluctant insider, someone who realized too late what he'd been enabling and tried to pivot. Another posits a darker truth, that Eclipse was not just about preserving intelligence, but erasing inconvenient witnesses, those who knew too much or had too much to trade. The deeper analysts dug, the more the lines blurred. Eclipse, it seemed, was not just an effort to win the war. It was the first act of the Cold War, and Kruger, knowingly or not, had become a piece on a chessboard where both kings were willing to sacrifice pawns. Whatever secrets 12 beheld, it wasn't just dangerous to the Nazis, it was dangerous to everyone. It was inevitable. Once the journals were catalogued, page numbers cross-checked, and contents aligned, the absence became undeniable. Dozens of entries were missing. Not torn out delicately, not removed for editing. Ripped violently. Some with fibers still clinging to the leather binding, others leaving jagged remnants like broken teeth. The missing sections weren't random. They clustered around March 1st through March 6, 1943, the final week before Kruger's disappearance. The remaining entries danced around whatever had been removed. References were cut off mid-thought. One fragment reads, "The meeting was not what I expected. They came without insignia. Spoke perfect German. I asked who sent them, and they only sighed." The page ends there. The next begins with a new paragraph entirely unrelated. But the most disturbing remnant was a half-burned sheet found beneath the false bottom of the courier case. Only the lower portion survived, scorched black along one edge. It read, "They will erase all of us who know. Not just from life, but from memory. Not kill, erase," experts believe Kruger may have attempted to destroy his own records in the final hours before vanishing, perhaps realizing he'd been compromised. But if so, why hide the rest? Why bury the documents instead of burning everything? Unless he wasn't just hiding them from enemies, but from supposed allies as well. Handwriting analysis shows the later. Entries become more frantic. The lettering shifts from tidy, measured script to uneven slashes, as though written under stress or in fear. In one line, he scrawls 12B is not what they think it is. It was never meant to be found. I was never meant to live. Who exactly they were remains unknown. Some believe he was referring to SS internal security. Others think it was Allied handlers who decided he was too dangerous to extract. A more chilling theory suggests something deeper. Something unsanctioned, operating within the machinery of war, using both sides as cover. The journals that remain paint a man unraveling under the weight of impossible knowledge. But the pages that are gone, the pages someone didn't want read, are what define the story now. What was Kruger carrying? What did he see? And what truth was so dangerous it had to be torn from history itself? The moment Kruger's journal referenced package 12B, it became more than a historical footnote. It became a target. Within days of the story breaking, a digital gold rush began. Academic researchers, Cold War historians, amateur codebreakers, Reddit sleuths, even conspiracy podcasters all started chasing the same question. What was 12B and where was it now? Some believed it was a document. A ledger perhaps cataloging war crimes or secret transfers of wealth. Others thought it might be a person, an informant hidden under a code name, protected or silenced. A few argued it was a blackmail archive, evidence that someone somewhere had kept leverage over powerful men long after the Reich fell. Forums erupted with speculation. One translated phrase from Kruger's notes, 12B must not cross, was interpreted by some to mean it couldn't leave a geographic border. Others linked the number 12 to rich documents classified above top secret and B2, the British zone of occupation after the war. A cryptic cross-reference to the Schweizer Abkommen Swiss agreement further muddied the waters, hinting at secret post-war financial transfers that had never been accounted for. Searches were launched, both digital and physical. A retired geospatial analyst mapped TOEFL Eskrat Ridge using Kruger's hand-run compass corrections, triangulating where a second cache might lie. A university in Munich began scanning Nazi-era rail records for anything resembling B-class shipments or off-book convoys. Even the CIA quietly contacted Czech authorities to request access to the full Kruger case file. But the most aggressive theories came from private intelligence bloggers. One former Mossad analyst published a piece suggesting 12B was a list. Names of Nazi officers who were smuggled into South America and integrated into Western intelligence networks. If true, it would mean Kruger hadn't just known secrets. He had the kind of proof that could unravel decades of political myth-making. Theories spiraled, leads collided. But amid the noise, one thing became clear. The hunt for 12B was no longer about Kruger. It was about control. History isn't just written by the victors. It's protected by them. And someone somewhere was beginning to feel the ground shift beneath their legacy. What started in a forest was now pulsing through servers, archives, and back channels across the world. The clock had started ticking again. 3 weeks after the initial investigation, the silence broke digitally. At 2:13 a.m. GMT, a 137-megabyte file, labeled Kruger Files Fragment A, appeared on a hidden Onion forum frequented by dark web archivists and wartime researchers. No message, no signature. Just the file uploaded from an untraceable server chain bouncing through Brazil, Romania, and Estonia. Within hours, it was downloaded by thousands. Its contents were staggering. Inside, over 200 scanned pages of documents written in a mix of German, Czech, and French. Many bore military stamps dated between 1942 and 1944. Others had no markings at all, suggesting they were meant never to be found. But it was the content that stopped readers cold. The first file was a transcript, an internal Nazi memorandum, referencing secret negotiations with Swiss banking institutions during the height of the war. It outlined asset transfers under false identities, including the names of 3 banks that had long denied involvement. Dates matched surviving financial records, but the account holders were all missing officers, presumed dead. If legitimate, the documents proved that billions in looted assets had been laundered before the Reich even began to collapse. The second section detailed a smuggling network codenamed Noctrick, Night Circle. It mapped weapons routes through Spain and Argentina, bypassing Allied detection. It even included diagrams for modified U-boat used in late-stage officer extractions. And again, names. Not just soldiers, scientists, engineers, bureaucrats who disappeared in 1945 only to resurface years later under new identities, often in Western governments and defense programs. But the most disturbing part came at the end, a personnel list. Partial, redacted, but very real. Among the names were individuals previously believed to have died in combat. One was linked to a post-war American intelligence group, another to a European aerospace company still in operation today. Governments responded quickly. Within 24 hours, the file was scrubbed from mainstream forums. Links were pulled, search results delisted, but it was too late. The leak had spread, and the question no one could answer was who posted it. Was this Kruger's insurance finally coming to light? A long-delayed dead man switch? Or was someone still out there completing what he started? One phrase buried in a footnote on page 73 hinted at what might come next. This is only part of... The rest remains sealed until the correct key arrives. The world had just seen a piece of the truth. But it was clear the full reckoning hadn't even begun. Wilhelm Kruger was never found. Not a grave, not a confirmed body, no death certificate, no obituary. Just whispers, shadows, and a trail of evidence that seemed to erase him as thoroughly. As it exposed him, his story doesn't end in a courtroom or with a bullet on the battlefield. It ends where it began. Deep in the woods, beneath roots twisted by time, in a rusted case no one was meant to find. Investigators eventually closed the official file. The recovered documents were boxed, cataloged, and archived. Some classified, some quietly made public, and others simply lost again. The forest at Teufelgrat was declared a protected site. The ridge still refuses cell signals, still makes compasses spin. Locals won't go near it after dusk. They say the trees are too quiet up there, that the ground holds on to things. As for 12B, it remains missing. If it ever existed in a physical form, it has yet to be found. But fragments continue to surface. Photos, signatures, coded receipts, fragments of names. Each leak more precise than the last. Someone out there still wants the truth told, or someone wants control over how it's remembered. Kruger himself remains a riddle. To some, he was a coward who ran. To others, a double agent who got too close to the truth. And to a small but growing number of researchers, he was something else entirely. A reluctant insider who tried in his final days to correct the trajectory of a world tearing itself apart. The documents he left behind didn't just expose criminal networks or implicate forgotten men in distant crimes. They reminded us that history is not fixed, it's fragile. That every file, every torn page, every silenced witness is a thread cut, or kept by those with the power to shape the future's memory of the past. Wilhelm Kruger disappeared in 1943, swallowed by mountains and war. But 82 years later, his voice emerged. Scorched by fire, buried in ash, and still echoing through the places he once walked. Whether that voice was a warning, a confession, or the final trace of a man no one really knew, one thing is certain: it spoke. And now that it has, it cannot be unheard. This story was brutal. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.